Shawn Michaels walked out of Montreal as WWF champion. Triple H rode that wave all the way to the main event scene eventually to help him. Very smart on his point. Do what you got to do, what's best for business, but also what's best for yourself, right? His entire career trajectory was impacted based on what happened that night. He was not a neutral party at all. He had enormous personal investment in the outcome. That does not mean he is lying, though. But it means his version of the story served his legacy. And smart man, though. Can't give him a stigma for doing what's best for himself. That's how he was thinking for his future. The Triple H Montreal Screwjob story at Roommate's show on December 12, 2024. But it wasn't until recently, because the New York Knicks won the NBA Finals, that I guess some people started checking out Playmaker's story and they found this video.
At a moment in time when it's a famous story in our business of a moment in time called the Montreal Screwjob, where they flipped the finish of a match on Bret Hart.
Okay.
So there was a moment when we were all...
Who remembers the Montreal Screwjob? Let me know in the comments. Put a 1 in the chat if you guys remember the story of the whole Montreal Screwjob.
Phone together, and Vince had come to us and said, Bret's he's not resigning, and he won't drop the title to Shawn. And Survivor Series was booked. We were maybe a week out or something like that. It was close. And the conversation was basically, here's what he's willing to do, and it's going to kill business. And there was just a silence, and nobody knew what to say. And I was the one, I was probably the least important person on the totem pole at that time, but I was like, I got to say it. And I was like, fuck that. If he won't do business, do it for him.
That is true. Triple H was in the bottom of the totem pole during the mid-90s. He was dealing with the backlash of the MSG incident when 2 of the Clique members left. Razor Ramon and Diesel left WWE to go to WCW, and where that leads to. But because they broke character, they had to blame someone, and unfortunately those 2 were gone and they weren't going to blame Shawn, so Triple H got blamed. Originally he was supposed to win, from what I've been told or heard, that he was supposed to be originally the winner of the King of the Ring in 1997, but because of that they ended up pivoting towards Stone Cold Steve Austin. And you know where it goes from there, the Austin 316 thing and so on and so forth. But at this point in time, Triple H's like, I'm already at the bottom of the poll. Let me just throw my words out there and see what happens.
And that started a conversation that led to the Montreal Screwjob. So that's kind of like a bold move. I guess that paid off. At a moment in time.
So this post also put that Triple H claims he was the one behind the infamous Montreal Screwjob. So we're going to go and little by little investigate this or dissect it and do an examination on this thing. So as always, welcome to the Tea Drop, where the brew is strong and there's a lot to talk about. And today we are not doing a reaction. We are doing an examination. Triple H sat down on the Roommates Show's podcast, which is hosted by 2 NBA players. Relaxed setting, nobody's pressing him, casual conversation. These are 2 current Knicks players who are back in 2024. They were Knicks players, but now they are NBA champions. Anyway, casual conversation, and he may claim that the wrestling world has been trying to settle for 28 years at this point, because he said he was the one who suggested it. And what do I mean by that? Well, he said, let's make business for him if Bret Hart wasn't going to work with us. So he said he was the one that suggested it, obviously the Montreal Screwjob. Now, let me ask you something. Is this a man who is finally telling his truth? Or is this a man rewriting history on a platform where nobody was going to push back anyway? They were just going to sit in and listen to him, because how much do they know to question? So as always, strap in and let's go through some of the receipts we have. And we are going to go through as many as we can. So here's what Triple H said and on this podcast, and verbatim, I need you to pay attention to how this goes down. And he says, and I quote on this December 12th podcast, there was a moment when we were all on the phone together and Vince has come to us and said, Bret not gonna re-sign and he won't drop the title to Shawn. And Survivor Series was booked for 1997. They were maybe a week out. The conversation was basically, here's what he's willing to do, and it's going to kill business. At least This is what Triple H was hearing from Vince. There was just a silence and nobody knew what to say. I was probably the least important person on the totem pole at that time, but I was like, F it. If he won't do business, do it for him. And that started a conversation that obviously led to the Montreal Screwjob. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. This is not the first time he said this, honestly. He made an identical claim in the Netflix documentary, Mr. McMahon. If you guys haven't seen it, I would suggest you guys see it. Very decent. Not telling everything that probably we should know, but enough is, enough said. Now, that dropped earlier in 2024, the same story, and he said it there. So we have the same story, two separate platforms, two completely different audiences. We have now set it to the Netflix world out there, who definitely has a good amount of viewers. And now I'm assuming for the Playmakers podcast, a lot of sports fans are watching this stream, or at least fans of these two players. Now, the question I want to answer today is not just whether he's telling the truth about saying those words in that meeting. The question is, does saying these words make him responsible for what happened in Montreal? Now, for me, we're just going to build it block by block and see what is what. So let's start with the basic thing for those that don't know, which is, what is the Montreal Screwjob? So, all right, let's start with this. Montreal Screwjob, November 9th, 1997, right? Survivor Series was done in that time in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Bret Hart at that time was the WWE champion, at that time WWF. His contract with Vince McMahon is expiring, and he has confirmed that he signed with WCW, that he was leaving. That part, nobody will dispute whether it's true or not. That's true. The problem of this situation is that Bret Hart refused to drop the title to Shawn Michaels in Canada. Obviously so. Why would you drop it? You're the hero of your country. Wouldn't make sense. Well, that was probably the first time, or first recent memory time in the modern era, that this situation happened. Now we're used to it because we've seen Sami Zayn lost to Roman Reigns in Canada, and we've seen others lose in Canada that are Canadian. So I guess at this time it would have been shocker for it, but especially with someone as big as Bret Hart. And I know we can't compare Sami Zayn to Bret Hart, but for Vince McMahon, it doesn't freaking matter. To them, it's just wrestlers, I guess. Now, his contract included a creative control clause, though. This is the important thing. Vince had agreed in writing that Bret could veto losing in his home country, and he exercised it. Vince needed that title off Bret, though, before he showed up on Monday Nitro wearing it. Because if you guys don't know, before this whole incident happened, and I should have put a picture of it, Alundra Blayze was the one that showed up on Monday Night Nitro with the belt. She showed up with the belt one time. And I don't want to, there was this incident that she showed up out of nowhere. Her contract expired in WWE. And she was, when the contract expired, she was the champ. And she showed up on Nitro with the women's title. No, everyone was shocked. And obviously, everyone was pretending to be shocked, but we know it wasn't true. But she eventually just brought a trash can and dumped the title. The WWF women's title was dumped in a trash can on Monday night, WCW Monday Nitro. So obviously, this created a PTSD on Vince. And that's why he needed it to be dropped off before his contract expired, because he didn't want to take the risk of Bret bringing it to WCW. Bret obviously respected Vince, though, and he offered alternative finishes besides the one that of him dropping the title to Shawn Michaels, because he just didn't like Shawn Michaels at that time. Vince publicly agreed to them, or whatever the alternate was, but privately, he had already made a different decision, though, even though he agreed to whatever Bret was offered. During the match, referee Earl Hebner called for the belt. Shawn Michaels had Bret locked in his own sharpshooter, which, by the way, disrespectful at that time to use someone else's moves, especially in their country. Talk about heel heat. Bret did not tap, though, during the sharpshooter. The match was stopped anyway by Earl Hebner. Shawn Michaels was handed the WWE Championship. Bret Hart spit directly in Vincent McMahon's face on live television. And then there are some videos out there and documentaries of Bret Hart during this time. And one of those scenes is that he then, in the locker room, punched Vince McMahon in the face. And then for the next 28 years after that scenario, the wrestling world argued about who came up with it until Triple H started talking. So here's what we know about the people involved and what each of them had actually said on record. And we will start with the easiest one. Let's start with Vince McMahon. For years, Vince claimed the Screwjob was an unilateral business decision he made alone. He told that version in the 1998 documentary Wrestling with Shadows, which is also the video that you will see clearly Bret spitting on Vince and then him punching him in the locker room. So if you guys haven't checked out that documentary, definitely a good watch. He admitted it in live on Raw with 5 words. The infamous words, you know which ones. Bret screwed Bret. And something after that. Maybe it was just 3 words, my bad. One of the most cynical lines in the history of professional wrestling and the lead up to the Vince McMahon character. Vince McMahon was the booker, the owner, the final authority for WWE. Nothing happened in that company without his approval. And that's the full stop. Let's go to the next group. Gerald Brisco and Patterson. You guys recall them, right? Now, these 2 men were Vince's most trusted agents, also helped him with creative. It was his inner circle on the road. Pat Patterson in particular had been cited across multiple credible accounts as being physically present in the room when the alternative finish was discussed and agreed upon with Bret. Brisco confirmed in later interviews that the meeting did happen, that the finish was pre-planned, that Bret Hart had no idea. So they had the pre-plan with Bret, and then they had the real plan, and they all knew this. Let's go with the next person involved. Shawn Michaels, the Heartbreak Kid. For years, Shawn denied knowing he said he had no idea the bell was going to ring early. You can see that in the Wrestling with Shadows documentary. He said the same thing. He maintained that story for a very long time. Then somewhere in 2019, he said on a podcast that he admitted the truth. He said he knew. He said he didn't want to do it. But he agreed. The man who locked in the hold, man who walked out with the title, knew the whole time. And crazy, like he said he never knew, and then he held that for almost, 20-something years, whatever. Crazy. Then there's Triple H. Triple H was obviously at that time not the booker. He was not even the owner. He wasn't even a senior road agent. In November 97, he was the Intercontinental Champion. He was a mid-card act. He even said it himself. He was the least important person on the totem pole. But he was Shawn Michaels' road partner, his best friend, the other half of D-Generation X. And 27 years later, he is claiming he planted the seed. Basically, he did the inception, I guess. Anyway, let's examine the claim, though. Let me ask you something. Why would Triple H tell his story twice on 2 completely different platforms? I guess it was around the same time he said it too. A few things can be happening at the same time. Triple H may have genuinely said those words on that phone call that was happening, and what he said may have been far less decisive than the way he is framing it now. But here are some receipts that we can go through. The first one, obviously, is the Mr. McMahon Netflix documentary. This one. The Netflix doc collaborated with him. Triple H Montreal claim appears in the Netflix Mr. McMahon documentary before this podcast clip ever circulated online. He was telling the story before it went viral, consistently across a few platforms, different formats, different audiences. No wrestling journalist to press him though, except maybe the documentary people could have pressed him, but I guess they never did. That consistency is important though, because at this point, as far as we know, he is not improvising. He's saying it as the truth, his truth. Now, the second receipt is his personal motive for doing this was enormous. In what world does it make sense for the man whose best friends directly benefited from the Screwjob to be the most credible narrator of how it started? Shawn Michaels walked out of Montreal as WWF champion. Triple H rode that wave all the way to the main event scene eventually to help him. Very smart on his point. Do what you got to do, what's best for business, but also what's best for yourself, right? His entire career trajectory was impacted based on what happened that night. He was not a neutral party at all. He had enormous personal investment in the outcome. That does not mean he is lying, though. but it means his version of the story served his legacy. And smart man, though. Can't give him a stigma for doing what's best for himself. That's how he was thinking for his future. And that's smart. And that is the receipt we can ignore when it comes to that. Thank you, Laura, for the 2 months of membership. Doing well. Much appreciated. Hope you're doing well. Thank you for joining the stream. Now let's talk about the third receipt. Vince's actual inner circle was already moving without Vince. Without Triple H, though. Pat Patterson and Gerald Brisco were Vince McMahon's trusted lieutenants. Both men were present in Montreal. Both have been cited in serious accounts as being in closed-door conversations about the finish well before any phone call. Triple H was not in Vince's inner circle in 1997. He was a mid-card talent. The idea that a young Intercontinental Champion, that was Triple H at that time, planting a seed in a group phone call was the pivotal moment and not the private conversation between these men and his most trusted agents. Which one is the real thing that pushed the seed? This is a significant claim that requires significant receipts to back up. Now, there are some missing items in this whole conversation when it comes to the Montreal Screwjob. Nobody on that phone call has publicly confirmed or denied that Triple H's words were the catalyst to making that situation happen. Not Vince, not Shawn, not Patterson, unfortunately, because Mr. Patterson has been long gone, rest in peace, and not Brisco. I believe Brisco is gone too. All we have is Triple H's account of his own role and a wrestling world that wants to believe him because the story is compelling. Planting a seed and growing that seed are two different things, though. Now, for me, Triple H is, to me, and based on all the information we have and what can we say based on the information we have, all I can say is most likely Triple H is telling the truth, but partially. Very likely did say those words on that phone call. The consistency across platforms tell me this story is not improvised at this point. And nobody, not a single person who has actually been in that room has come forward saying he is lying. No one. Here's the distinction, though, when it comes to this. A suggestion made by the least important person on the group call at that time is not the same as authorship of the plan. Vince McMahon had the power that whole time. Vince had the motive of why he needed to do it. Vince had the legal authority to do exactly what he did. And he was already being advised by Patterson and Brisco in private rooms. Triple H was not invited into those rooms. So a lot of missing gaps in this story. Now, what Triple H is claiming is that his voice broke the silence. That may be completely true, though. But the silence is already being broken elsewhere. In meetings he was not being part of. So we don't know who's what. And unless everyone brings it up, that's going to be the cloud in the air until that's being revealed. Anyway, the Montreal Screwjob was Vince McMahon's decision, executed by Shawn Michaels with full knowledge, supported and planted alongside Gerald Brisco and Pat Patterson, and possibly nudged into motion by a 28-year-old Triple H, who happened to speak up first when nobody else would. Though that is not the same as starting it. That is a man telling a version of history that makes him, to the company, the hero of a story that already had its author. But here's what I want from you. Do you think Triple H is the guy, the man who broke the silence and sent Bret Hart home without the title? Or is this man, with the 28 year of hindsight and a Hall of Fame legacy to protect, rewrite history on a platform where nobody was going to press him? Let me know your thoughts in the comments and we can have a future discussion about it. Maybe we'll follow this up if anything comes to light about this. As always, if the T hit right, hit the like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next video.